Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down a large storm that'll be coming to the United States over the next few days, and this will bring several rounds of severe weather to areas like the northern and central plains, back through the Midwest, and perhaps through the Ohio Valley as we go throughout the week. In addition to that, we're going to be talking more about a heat wave that is going to be building across a large chunk of the United States over the next few days, where the Midwest and the Ohio Valley will return to summer-like conditions. And lastly, we're going to give you an update on the hurricane season and what's happening right now and what is to come, as Hawaii is actually going to see some impacts in terms of a tropical storm, and we also could see a hurricane develop here soon in the Atlantic Ocean. We are going to begin with what's happening across the United States right now, and currently there's not really much happening. It's been a pretty quiet last 7 to 10 days. We haven't had as many videos as usual because the weather just has not been that active. Overall, across the East Coast and anywhere in the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, it's relatively dry. The only exception really is Florida, where we do have a stationary frontal boundary that's going to continue to bring several rounds of showers and thunderstorms both today, tomorrow, and probably even through Sunday into Monday of next week. So expect an active weather pattern there, but for the rest of the eastern tier of the country, there's not much happening, and it should stay that way until at least Sunday. Back over in the central plains, we had a large complex of thunderstorms develop in Kansas, Nebraska, and Colorado last night. We actually had a tornado right on the Kansas and Colorado border yesterday. There's a photo of that on our Twitter page at MaxVelocityWX. It was pretty crazy for what we were, looking at for storms yesterday. Overall, this complex is dying out though, and that should kind of fizzle as we go later into the morning. Also, back over on the West Coast, things are still relatively quiet over there. We do have an upper level low spinning just offshore, and that will be our next large storm that'll bring severe weather to a large chunk of the northern tier of the United States as we go into the weekend and as well as into next week. Now let's talk more about the severe weather potential for the next few days, and we'll begin with today, which is Flying Fences Friday. We are beginning today with a risk for pants across parts of the central plains, back even into parts of Montana, and as well as Utah, where the two legs are going into both the central plains and the other one going back towards Arizona. The main concern for today in either marginal threat will be damaging winds and hail. We also have a marginal threat in southeast Arizona. Now, the biggest thing that's really going to be impacting our weather pattern over the next several days when it comes to both severe weather and the heat wave is going to be our jet stream. This is what it looks like as of right now. We got a big trough back over in the Pacific Northwest. We have a very dominant ridge that is beginning to build to the north, which is eventually going to go into the Midwest and Ohio Valley and build heat over the next few days. And then back over on the East Coast, we have that trough that was bringing colder air that is now moving out of the United States. So unfortunately, your time is up if you're in the Midwest and Ohio Valley for that colder weather, at least for now, because watch this as we go into Sunday. We have that trough moving across the Rocky Mountains. This is going to bring the potential for severe weather on Sunday to parts of the northern plains, and then Monday we're going to be watching for parts of the Midwest, especially back over in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and northern Iowa. And then Tuesday into Wednesday could be anywhere really in the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. So we're going to talk more about that here in a second, but look at this on Sunday. That ridge really builds up to the north. It is going to be dominating the entire Midwest and Ohio Valley. That's going to keep things for the most part dry, and it's also going to keep things much warmer than average. Once we go into Monday into Tuesday, that trough continues to move across the northern plains. It is going to be a negatively tilted trough, which is going to lead to more moisture content across the northern tier of the country. That's what's going to help to fuel some of that severe weather potential. And then once we go into Tuesday into Wednesday, that trough continues to move to the east. And one thing I do want to point out is that that trough will gradually weaken throughout the week. That'll open the door for another trough as we go later into next week. And this one could actually bring one of two things, and it will probably bring both. One of which will be another threat of severe weather, probably going to be for the Ohio Valley and back through parts of maybe even the Northeast. I don't know if it's going to go this far south. I just kind of drew an outline for the general area. And then also another thing that this will bring is much colder weather to areas in the northern plains, the central plains, the Midwest, the Ohio Valley. We even could see this dive into the southern plains as we go into next weekend. So something to watch for. It's going to be one of the bigger troughs that we've seen come out of Canada in quite some time. And that really, I'm talking about like the springtime is the last time we saw something like this that did end up bringing some colder weather. So definitely something to keep in mind there. Should be a nice little cool down. Now, overall, there's going to be a lot of instability over the next several days. This is what we're looking at on Saturday. Overall, there is going to be a ton of instability in Kansas and Nebraska, but there's no initiator, nothing to really use that up. Where we're watching on Saturday, we'll be back up here mainly in the northern plains and perhaps a small little quadrant there in Nebraska and Colorado. Once we go into Sunday, that threat of severe weather will really build in the northern plains, especially in North and South Dakota, and that'll eventually migrate into Minnesota going into Monday morning, and then eventually going into Monday afternoon and evening. I could see there being a better chance for damaging winds and perhaps even some tornadoes across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and northern Iowa. Lots of instability, and there will definitely be some wind shear. Once we go into Tuesday, I think the threat of severe weather is lower, thus even having all this instability. I don't think there's going to be anything super organized on Tuesday, at least as of right now. That could definitely change over the next day or two. And then once we go into Wednesday into Thursday, that instability builds right back up again in the northern plains on Wednesday and Thursday. We'll probably have a few more shots of severe weather before we go into next weekend. And then by next weekend, I think things are quieter again when it comes to just purely severe weather. So here's what the future radar looks like for the next several days, beginning with today. Overall, pretty dry for most of the lower 48. Once we go into Saturday, we're not really going to be talking about much severe weather, but by Sunday, I think that severe weather potential starts to increase. It is a relatively conditional threat, but if storms can fire, we will have the potential for severe weather. There's going to be a bit of a cap in place on Sunday in the northern plains, so that's going to be one thing to watch for on Sunday. And then as we go into Monday, storms are going to start to build more across the northern plains, and really we're watching for one area in particular. Those storms are going to begin back over North and South Dakota. They'll try to form into a line as we go into the evening hours across Minnesota and Wisconsin, so more of a wind threat, but we could see a couple of embedded tornadoes predominantly in southern and central Minnesota. And then once we go into Tuesday, there will be another shot for some storm activity, but overall, capping does appear to be a problem. As long as we have a temperature inversion or a cap in the atmosphere, there is going to be a limiter there for there being storm development. So we might see some storms on Tuesday. It's really uncertain, though, of where they develop. The European model shows a couple complexes in Iowa and then also one in Ohio. It's really just kind of all over the place right now for Tuesday. Wednesday is kind of the same. Doesn't really look like anything organized. Thursday into Friday, there will probably be more organization in the Midwest for some damaging wind potential. But again, nothing really widespread is in the forecast as of right now. I don't see any big events really in the near future when it comes to severe weather, but we're going to continue to keep a close eye on it, because I do think if we do have a live stream at any point over the next 7 days, it would probably fall on Monday. So that's what I'm looking at as of right now, perhaps even Thursday or Friday as well of next week. Here's what the temperatures look like for the next several days. So again, that heat builds across the entire Great Plains in the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. By the time we go into late next week, that heat is just going to continue to stay there, but some colder air will usher in, especially to the northern plains in the Midwest by next weekend. And then as we go into next week, things are going to stay relatively around, if not just above average for most of the country. Overall, does not look to be a super big cold front by any means, at least as of right now. Temperatures in Texas for today are just absurd. I mean, we're talking about low 100s, some areas near 115 near Wichita Falls today. Heat is going to start to die down, though, over the next few days. We're going to start to see those temperatures just drop off a little bit. This is what Monday looks like right now. It still looks really ridiculous. I mean, we're still talking about 100s in some areas, but this heat is going to build more in the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, where areas will build into the 90s, especially in the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. And then by the time we go into Tuesday and as well as into Wednesday, that heat is just going to continue to stay up there, and then it'll eventually start to fall off by next weekend as colder air ushers into the northern plains and as well as the Midwest. Now, the Atlantic tropics are still relatively quiet. We don't have any tropical cyclone activity expected over the next 7 days. I do want to mention that there are again a couple tropical waves that'll be coming off the coast of Africa. There is still at least a medium chance that a tropical storm or hurricane develops in early September across parts of the central or western Atlantic Ocean. Now, where that goes from there is very uncertain. A lot of the ensemble members still bring this out to sea or back over towards the East Coast, but there are a couple scenarios that this does go into the Caribbean and eventually the Gulf. So at this point, we don't really know what's going to happen. It's just something that we're watching for, nothing imminent here in the United States. It's a good reminder, though, just to be weather aware as we do go closer to the peak of hurricane season. Again, the reminder is that the peak of hurricane season is September 10th. We are going to see a lot more activity, I think, in September. Probably at least one, if not maybe even 2 or 3 big storms are probably going to happen in September. Here's what Tropical Storm Hone looks like right now. We are talking about the Pacific Ocean, not something we talk about much, but look at this. The United States is actually going to be impacted by a tropical storm or maybe even a low-end Cat 1 hurricane. This is Tropical Storm Hone. It is going to be crossing towards Hawaii. It is probably just going to stay south of Hawaii, but there are tropical storm watches in effect. I would just expect mostly rainfall there and some gusty winds, perhaps even a little bit of storm surge, but overall does not look to be a major hurricane or anything like that at this point. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.